Are you a fundable entrepreneur? Sig Mosley, the Godfather of Atlanta angel investing, shares his 10 criteria to help you answer this question. He developed this over 32 years of investing in over 200 deals. This will help you answer the question, do you have the entrepreneur X factor it takes to get to the money? Enjoy. Hey, welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'm Charlie Paparelli. Today's guest is a special guest, is Sig Mosley, a 32-year professional angel investor. Our topic today is the X factor, what separates fundable entrepreneurs. Today's podcast is for entrepreneurs who are seeking funding and angels looking to be better at investing in early-stage companies. I think both of them will benefit from Sig's experience. My guest, my friend, my mentor over the years is Sig Mosley. Sig is called the Godfather of angel investing. He has invested in, I don't know, we're going to find out, but I think it's hundreds of deals over his 32 years in his angel career. And he even has an annual leadership community award named in his honor called the Siggy Awards. And this is what a Siggy looks like. I happen to be the lucky recipient of one of these great awards. So this is the Siggy. It's one of those bobbleheads actually looks like somebody that you know. Okay, it really is a coveted piece of hardware that only a few people in the community have, and I noticed that they keep it on their shelves behind them. Just as you see, Sig in this picture, he's done the same thing. This year, Sig stopped investing. I thought that this would be a great time to hear his secrets on choosing the right entrepreneur for your investment. So welcome, Sig. I'm glad that you've joined me and given me this time.
Well, thank you, Charlie. I appreciate the opportunity to be involved with you and the great work you're doing on keeping our entrepreneurs and our investors up to date on what's going on in the world.
Well, thank you for that. This is a lot of fun for me, and I always have interesting people. We're always doing a good job. So the first thing I wanted to discuss with you is you've gotten this title, and I heard it, I don't know how many years ago. I bet you it's been 10 years ago that I heard Sig Mosley, he's the Godfather of Atlanta angel investing. And I'm just wondering, how did you earn that title?
Well, it goes back to the mid-90s to when we were involved in a number of deals. One particular deal was one called TradeX that I had shown to everybody here in town, and only UPS decided to invest in the deal, and turned out it was a major home run deal. And I had actually shown it to people twice and got turned down. And then that and going into the dot-com bust, we continue to invest when a lot of people were pulling out. Now, we reduced our investing, but we continue to be in the market trying to help the entrepreneur. And so the title just sort of came about that I would continually involved. So I got the title of Godfather.
Do you remember when you first heard it?
No, it was probably in the early 2000s.
Right.
Because John Emway, who I had worked with for a number of years, had the title of Angel or Godfather of Technology. So
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so he had that title. And so as we were continuing to do everything, sort of picked up Godfather of Angel Investing.
That's great. Well, I know that everywhere you go, whenever they mention your name, they always mention this title, okay? So how many deals did you invest in? How many companies, I shouldn't say that, how many entrepreneurs did you invest in? That's really what it is.
Well, it's easier to count companies.
Okay, good. Let's do that.
Because not every, you can almost take the number of companies and multiply by 2.
Yeah, there you go.
Because
okay.
I have had 200 deals, and I had 122 when I was doing normal angel investing along with John Emway.
Okay.
I had 23 deals that I have done through Mosley Ventures. We had 9 deals that I have done through Zane Investments. And then I have roughly 20 deals that I have done on my own as an angel. And then I am an advisor to Silicon Road Ventures, and they have done 28 deals. Now, I don't count those 28 because I'm just an advisor
Yeah,
there.
that wouldn't be fair to count those 28.
No,
I love that, your honesty. You're going back to your audit roots, when you started with, who were you with, Price Waterhouse?
No, KPMG.
Oh, I'm sorry I said Price Waterhouse. KPMG. There you go. That's when they were the big 8, not the big 4.
That's right.
I remember those days. So how much, I don't know if you know this number, but how much capital did you know this number. How much capital did you start with back in 92 or when you were representing or partners with John Imlay? And you started the Imlay, what was it called?
Imlay Investments.
Imlay Investments. That's how you sort of walked into this angel investing marketplace.
Right.
So how much capital did you start with?
$4 million.
4?
Yes.
$4 million.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the pot you started with.
That's right. That was approximately 10% of what John's net worth was at the time.
Okay, great. So that's a good way to start thinking about if you're getting into angel investing, depending on your age and, your appetite, I guess, is how much should you set aside? How much have you invested in companies over the last 32 years in total? Because when in companies, you got cashed out, you put more money back in, you kind of moving this thing and it grows.
Close to $100 million.
$100 million. How much did you, is this an okay question to ask you? How much did you have in total exits?
That is not a number that I have calculated.
No kidding. Well, what was, when you talked about the one that put you on the map?
Yeah.
Was the one that no one else wanted to invest with you except UPS, which was TradeX.
Right.
So if you just look at TradeX,
well,
that was the one that took you from, this $4 million in the kitty here to all of a sudden what?
Well, but there was one other deal that came along before TradeX that also significantly increased our network was Internet Security System. That was Tom Noonan and Chris Klaus, because we invested in that in 1996, and they went public in 1998, and we had a 30-to-1 return on that deal. We don't disclose how much we put into individual deals, but I can tell you we had a 30-to-1 return.
And what was the return in TradeX?
The TradeX return was 180-to-1.
180-to-1. Yeah, I remember this is when, for those of you who don't know, when we were investing in the 90s, we would have a, big exit be 20 million. I'm talking 20 million in total, like the size of the company, right? Or 50 million is like, oh my God, And when I were having breakfast the day that TradeX, the morning after TradeX actually sold, okay? And you walked into my office. I still remember you standing at my office door at 7:00 in the morning. And you said, we sold TradeX and it sold for how much?
Well,
the company?
The original was $1.8 billion.
Right. So Sig says to me, I said, so how much you sell it for? And he said, 1.8 billion. And I said, 1.8 million? He goes, no, with a B. And I almost fell out of my chair. And then we went. So that's how I heard about TradeX.
If somebody had asked me if I was going to sell it for over $1 billion, I would have told them, no way.
You tell them they're crazy, right?
They're right.
Yeah. Because how much did MSA actually sell for when it went to that
million? $330 million.
$130 million, and that was a company that was in business since what, 67?
63, actually.
63, and sold to Dun & Bradstreet. What year was that?
1990.
1990. Okay, so that's 30 years, roughly, right? 27 years. And here's TradeX. And how this was the .com. So 3 years from start to exit, 4 years from start to exit, 1.8 billion with a B. That's how the market changed so rapidly with the .com era as it came in, which is just astounding to me how that changed. So then, how many of these, one other thing, so we talked about, you don't keep track of how many exits, right? Or did you? You don't know how many exits.
I don't keep up with
dollars. So how many exits did you actually have?
Well, it depends on how you define exit. Sometimes you get...
let's just say you got anything back.
Well, I'm still sitting on 20 companies at this point. So that brings it down to 180.
Okay.
And I probably got 120, 125 that I got.
And you got exits?
Yes.
Man, you make me look like a loser, buddy. You're great.
No, you said any back. So
any back. That's what I'm talking about. That's really good. That means that shows your involvement and how you stayed on top of these. And if you just think, this is a rough estimate, okay? How many of those, you said you don't talk about the dollars that came out of these things, but how many of the companies of the 200 companies that you invested in will really have created most of that wealth?
Well, TradeX created most of the wealth.
So TradeX, one company, ISS, that was a great return.
Right. Well, we had 10 or 12 that were good, solid return.
Like 30 to 1 or better?
No, it could be 10 to 1 or about.
10 to 1 or better. And how many companies you say?
About 10 to 12.
10 to 12 companies out of 180, because we don't know about the 20. That just gives you an idea for people that are investing, what it takes to get into or luck into maybe one of those big return companies. They're hard to see when you're looking at two founders and no revenue or $20K a month in revenue. It's hard to see what it's going to look like. So I just want people to understand that. So then you've gotten to a point where you've been doing this for 32 years, and I know for several years. Would you be willing to discuss your age a little?
Yeah, I'm 78.
You're 78. So how long ago was it that you decided that you started struggling with, when am I going to stop investing? And then I know you cheated, because you're like a guy who has a gambling habit. It's just so much of who you are. So how long ago was it that you started thinking about this?
I should go back to 2010 when John Emily said that we were no longer going to do angel investing.
So he called it.
Called it because he thought I needed to slow down and enjoy life more. Well, that lasted about 12 to 18 months. And then I formed Mosley Ventures, and I'm just finishing year 11 of Mosley. And then 2 years, no, I take that back, that was 18, about 6 years ago, we decided...
So you're 72.
We decided we were not going to raise a second Mosley fund.
Okay.
Because it required a 12-year commitment, and I wasn't willing to make a 12-year commitment at 72, but I didn't want to get out of the business. So that is when I started working with Zane Ventures, and it's just been in the last 3 to 4 years that I have really begun to try to figure out how to gradually work my way out of doing angel investing.
Well, let me ask you though, you say it that way, but how did you get to that day where you saw a good deal and you still said no, because I'm just not writing checks anymore?
Well, I didn't quit writing checks to January 1 of the current year. And the reason I got to that point was because I was continuing to write checks. And therefore, I would just add in on year to how much longer I was going to have to be involved, because even on my personal investments, I am involved in the companies. I was an angel or a VC. And I decided I would never going to get out of the routine of being able to not work full time. I didn't quit writing checks.
Okay.
So I concluded that on January 1, I wasn't going to put any more money in any deals unless I were already in the deal. Now,
So you do follow-ons, is what
I
you're
do
saying.
follow on just for the companies I'm in.
Okay.
But I chose not to write any more checks. And I tell entrepreneurs up front when they want to talk to me, I say, I'm happy to talk to you, work with you. I will not put money in you because I'm not investing any longer.
Wow. But you're still doing follow-ons, and here you are, 78 years old with 20 companies.
Yes.
When did you do your last follow-on?
The week.
And now this is your money.
Yes.
Your personal money, right?
Yeah.
And so to raise a fund for a VC firm, a VC fund, is a 12-year commitment. How does that change the number of years you expect to get money back on personal investments? Is it the same time frame?
At the same time. Well, you hope that maybe it will be 5 to 8 years, but you don't always know. I have had investment goes 20. I think my one good one with 20.
Yeah, I'm in one that's right now 18 years.
Yeah.
And
but sometimes
actually, if they last that long, they actually do turn into something.
Yeah. Well, I had one that I got into. I sold it in 22, and it was my third best return on
From
cash.
09 to 22. Okay, so 13 years.
Third best return cash on cash. Now, it was a horrible IR. All the money went in the first 3 years.
Yeah, that's one thing I think that entrepreneurs don't think about. They think about, I remember there was one that said to me after I was invested in something for 9 years, said, you're going to make twice your money. And that's a great return for you. And I'm like, if you do the finance calculation on that, it's not a great return. I mean, we're talking T-bills here, okay? And I put a lot of time into this thing, all right? Now, that's not to say that we're not happy to get even our money back if something that we're in it for that long, sometimes,
Yeah, well, I have had some. The one that went 24 years, I got my money back, and that was it.
Isn't that something? So you actually lost on discounted cash flow. If you put $1 in, you probably got 40 cents back or whatever.
Right.
In real dollars, right?
Yes.
Kind of a thing. Yeah. All right. Well, then since you're not doing that anymore, I love that you're telling the entrepreneurs. So it took you from being 72 to the start of this year, when you turned 78 during the year, to finally tell these people, entrepreneurs, I'm not writing new checks.
Yes.
6 years it took you to get there. Right. Congratulations, Sig. You've matured. All right. So then the question becomes is, so I know you. And so how do you remain engaged in the Atlanta startup community?
Well, I still maintain an office at the ATDC. I am still a VC in residence there. So I talk to companies there.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to new entrepreneurs because I still get entrepreneurs who want to talk to me, even though I won't give them money. An EIR at Emory.
That's entrepreneur in residence for people who don't know what that is. Okay.
And then I serve on the board of directors at the Russell Innovation Center.
Okay.
Which is an incubator accelerator program here in Atlanta.
And that's for minorities.
For minority.
Primarily,
And I serve on the Georgia Advanced Technology Development Board, is a nonprofit out of Georgia Tech that involved in innovation. And then, I am on probably half a
Well, you got
dozen
the
or so
Silicon Road
boards.
Ventures. You're still
Silicon
advising
Road
them, right?
Ventures,
Yeah.
and then half a dozen board seats that I sat on.
For those 20 companies. Yeah. But you're only setting on board seats for companies that you have investment in.
Yes.
Talking companies, not
I
the
do
boards of
have
these other things.
I do have a couple of board advisors seats that in company that I'm not an investor in.
Okay. Why would you take those? I'm just curious.
The entrepreneur, a friend who asked me
Okay.
to be on the board to help
So
advise
you had a
them.
relationship with the person. You're
Right.
not looking for board seats.
No, I'm not looking for board seats.
No. And and that's the end of this segment of this interview. I just kind of want to stop with that. But, one of the things that I find that's important as we're getting older is to make sure that we continue to hang out with people who remain engaged. It's so easy to retreat and disappear. But, that's why I kind of, run into you and you tell me the things that you're doing. It has an influence on me. You've always mentored me. I watched how you do things and I say, God, he can do it. I could keep doing that. I could go to that meeting, I don't have to just disappear.
Yeah,
One of the things that happened recently is Sid Mukherjee, who is the founder and managing partner of Silicon Road Ventures. He said to me at a son's wedding I went to, he said, I haven't seen you around except at Angel Lounge. And I went, I need to think about that. Until I can still have something to offer, and I need to be a little bit more engaged. Sig's engaged, he's engaged. I need to be out there. So it's good that we hang out with each other, that we kind of grew up together in this business, stay active, even though we're not writing checks.
right.
I think it's a good thing.
It is. And it's good for the entrepreneurs. They need to see it. They need to still get the benefit of our wisdom and so on. And can't do that if you aren't out and about.
Yeah. And I'll finish with this is, it's interesting that the new angel investors, the next generation of angel investors, even two generations back, they are turning into billionaire angels because these companies are there's more companies turning to $1 billion status valuations. And these angel investors doing the exact same thing we did. They saw more trade X's. You saw one in your lifetime.
Right.
They've seen 1 to 2 to 3.
Uh-huh.
And maybe they'll have more in their career because some of them are still in their mid-40s.
Right.
So it's just incredible how the market has continued to grow and develop and the opportunities that are out there. It's really fascinating. So I'm just telling that to the Godfather, okay?
Right. Well, think about the impact that the internet had, Charlie. Back when you and I began, the internet didn't exist in the commercial world.
Right.
It came along in 1994, 95.
Right.
And that impact is significantly the whole age of technology. That just changed everything. And so if you were investing, if you were doing, my first 3 or 4 years, you would never have gotten to $1 billion company. Once the internet came along and got through some of its trouble and so, but once that internet took off, that is where money just got made.
It did get made like that. It just, the acceleration of revenue, the ability to kind of to reach the market just exploded literally overnight versus the way we used to have to do it with direct mail, conferences and shows. I have an entrepreneur that I know, he calls it hard work and clean living. Okay. And I always like that expression because there was no magic to it. There wasn't a turn on event where all of a sudden, boom, it was there. We couldn't price software at $10 a seat. We were selling multi-million-dollar deals to large corporations that had large implementations and grew slowly. And oh my gosh, it was very different. So you're right. You're right. It's a good time to be an angel investor. 10 years ago going forward here, I think is going to be excellent.
Yeah. Now, I remember one company that here in Atlanta that bought SAP They took 7 years to implement SAP.
I always look at back then, those SAP days as they came and they were partnered with, that was the days of change, what was it, change management? Is that what it was called?
Right. Yep.
And I loved that. The SAP story is they're partnering with these big consulting firms, and the implementations were taking forever. And the reason was the consulting firms were pressing this in part of their methodology, this whole change management. So it was all change your processes, re-engineer them. That's what it was. Re-engineering is what it was, right? Change management. Re-engineering is the word I was looking for. And SAP at one point came out and they just said, look, if you want to re-engineer your processes, you just implement our software and you will have re-engineered your process. And I was like, that's brilliant. So they cut all that out. So the implementation started to go faster.
Yep, that they did. But they needed to.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So let's go on to something else, okay, which is really getting into this X factor piece. Let's get to how you evaluate an entrepreneur to determine if he or she has that X factor that makes them investable by early stage investors. When I asked you about this over lunch, you just came up with these 10 criteria that you use. I guess you've developed them over the years, these 32 years that you had here. And you go through each of these criteria, almost like a checklist for these people, for these entrepreneurs, to determine if they do have, in fact, that X factor. So let's go through them.
Okay.
And so there's 10 of them, and we'll go through them one at a time. The first is this co-founder. Well, why don't you describe it? What do you call it?
Well, it's more of the expertise of the entrepreneur about in the area that he is trying to solve a problem.
Okay, so are you an expert, right, in industry?
Right. Do you know something about the industry or technology that you are trying to build? Now,
okay.
That not to say that you have to have it by yourself as the entrepreneur, but you or your co-founder or somebody very high up in the management team need to have an expertise in the industry. It's kind of like taking a healthcare guy and putting him to build a telecom company. More than likely, he would not succeed because he doesn't know anything about the industry. And so he would be like throwing somebody out there to build something he had no idea about. So somebody in the closely held team has to have some knowledge about what the industry they're trying to solve.
So not knowledge, though, but they got to be they have to have experience is what it really comes down to.
Well,
they're experts in that. Expertise is experience. Have you, did you learn this because you invested in something that, where an entrepreneur who didn't quite have this, but really sounded good?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they all sound good.
Well, yeah, it's like actually one of my experiences had been in where I had invested in the entrepreneur originally. Then I did a second deal with him, but he went into a field that would not hit.
Okay.
And he thought he was the expert, and he wasn't. And the second company did not do well. And so
but because of your relationship with him, you followed him. You followed him to the next company. Well, that makes sense. So that was a loyalty play. That wasn't a criteria play.
Well, but it taught me the criteria play.
Okay.
It taught me that loyalty, you can't be loyal because even the best teams sometimes make dumb decisions.
Yeah.
And so you got to look at what they are investing in and where their area of expertise is and their knowledge base. Because if for whatever reason they choose a bad industry that they don't have that knowledge, then the likelihood of that deal going well is not good.
That's good. Yeah. Because you don't, I say that you don't understand the secret sauce or the the secret handshake on how an industry operates, or if you don't have that technology expertise for the platform you're trying to build, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
if you do the right thing as an angel investor, you would tell that entrepreneur he's doing something dumb. Sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't.
yeah. I remember when I got started, I was partners with Richard Brock.
Yes.
Well, Richard Brock was writing software for CPAs, and he was a CPA. So we were automating CPA offices for the first time in the late 70s. And he actually coined the phrase practice management and wrote the first practice management system, which turned into time and billing. But he really called it practice management because he had an insider view on how to increase partner profitability, if you will, going forward. And so he was very, very gifted. But you talk about a guy that knew both things, though. He was unique. He knew the technology and he knew the industry. So he was a unique cat. But when we partnered, all of a sudden, I wound up being the technology side of that thing.
Well, see, that is the other part of a piece of the, and again, I'm talking from a technology type investment.
Okay.
That you need to have two people that are what I call co-founders.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need a technology person and you need a business person. Because it's very hard to be both the business person and the technology person and try to build a company by yourself.
Right.
So I work for companies with two co-founders. I have invested in 3 or 4 that did not have to, and I paid the price for those because the person can't do both. Because particularly if you have a true technical guy who is a technician, an engineer, or whatever, they tend to make bad salespeople and bad business people because they just don't know how to do it. And
right. They're mostly, if I build it, they will come kind of people. You're right about that.
And so, a great example of the Tom Noonan and Chris Kraus.
Huh?
Noonan developed the product originally. He got it up and developed most of the way. And
you mean Klaus developed the product?
Right. And he realized that he did not want to run the business or could not run it. So he went out and found Noonan, brought Noonan in, and they developed a great partnership. Chris took the technical, Tom took the business, and they made it work.
Yeah, it's great. I remember I interviewed Chris, one of my interviews, and he did talk about back then, and, he was still a student at Georgia Tech.
Yes.
And he told me, he says, I'm talking to the government, they're interested in this thing, and they're asking me what things should cost, and he said, I didn't know anything, I just wrote it. And so when he met Tom Noonan, that was the stroke of luck, the destiny, if you will, that kind of made it all fall in place because Tom sure knew how to sell to large institutions. I mean, he was amazing.
No, he was.
Yeah.
And Chris had the knowledge and common sense to go find somebody like that.
He did.
And make it work.
That was great. He was still living at his grandmother's house. He had a room
in the basement.
In the basement. There you go. All right. So the first one is they need to be an expert, but they also, and at the same time, when you say they need to be an expert, and they could only be an expert in one of the two things, either industry or in technology. And that's why you need these co-founders.
Yeah.
There's a biblical basis for this too, by the way, that in Ecclesiastes, it says 2 are better than 1 because if one falls down, the other one can pick him up. And it says 3 is even better because a 3-stranded rope can't be easily broken, and it really does apply to what's going on here. I always, when I read that, I always say, yeah, that was the lesson. It was written, millennial ago, and now we still need to be following it. All right, so that's the first one. So co-founder expertise and the fact that they are co-founders. What was the second one? The second criteria that determines this X factor. Is that coachability?
Coachability.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs have to be coachable. Now, it is hard.
Everybody's coachable.
No, they are not.
Okay.
You should know that because we had one investment together. Your first job outside of Richard probably, where the entrepreneur, what you want is somebody who can think for himself, but who also will take in advice and think about it. Now, he may not always do it, which is fine, because you don't want a yet person sitting there. I have an entrepreneur today in one of my 20 companies. Every time we have 5 investors in the company. Every time one of the 5 of it make a suggestion, he says, yes, immediately, I'll go do it. He doesn't think about it. He just says, yes. Well, that is not coachability, because he isn't really thinking about, let me see what that does to what the plan is, and to where I think we need to go, and to where the market is. If the ideal is good, then fine, I will implement it. If the ideal in the end doesn't make sense to the way I think the business is going, then I will tell the investor no. But in his case, he tells the investor yes and go does it immediately, or it's the right suggestion.
So what we're looking for, coachability, another way. I never thought about it this way. This is good. So a coachability is basically taking the experience that you have with the entrepreneur, okay, in the industry or in technology or whatever it is, okay, and receiving and combining, receiving the experience of the investor, who has a lot of more business experience generally than the entrepreneur does. But he receives it and he tries to put these two things together to come up with an even better sort of approach to whatever the problem might be.
It doesn't have to be just the investor. It could be a board of advisor.
Well, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Anybody who has additional knowledge who make a suggestion, you need to at least consider it. The entrepreneur should consider it. And if it makes sense, then do it. If it doesn't, then tell them why and don't do it. But you got to at least be willing to listen. We have had a number of entrepreneurs over the years that, oh yeah, they technically listen, but they never thought about it again. Once you said it to them, they just never even thought about it.
They just discounted it and they moved on.
Right.
They knew that they were right and their way was the best way.
Right.
Yeah. So you need to consider this advice and again, taking all your advisors and your experience that's hands-on on the ground in the market, you put that together and you're going to come up with a better solution.
Right.
The first example you gave, I thought was very interesting, and it always scares the heck out of me when I'm talking to, over the years, if I talk to an entrepreneur and he says to me, well, what do you think I should do? And I get nervous. I'm like, I know I can come up with what I think you should do, but I don't know. I'm not reading the market every day. I'm not talking to customers. I'm not sitting here with the employees in meetings or with your management team and seeing who's capable of what and where they're at. I don't know all this stuff, but I can just give you some 20,000 foot. Here's what I think you should do. And if he's one of those people that says, oh, well, I'll do that. Well, now I'll sink the company if he takes that, if he just goes and does it.
Right. Yeah. And so that is one of the hard things, to be able to figure out what that entrepreneur mindset is when you are interviewing him in the beginning. Because how
do you get to that then? If the one side is he's uncoachable, in other words, he knows best, and then the other side is they'll do whatever you want. Okay, how do you get to that coachable? How do you determine? Oh, this guy, he's coachable.
It got caught, and that's just what it is. You just have to try to get to know the guy enough, and you do that by going through due diligence and all of this, and you spend time with him, and you try to get where you can read him. Sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't.
I've been actually fooled. I usually can pick it up pretty well, but I got fooled by somebody that appeared to be coachable, And then one day they just became completely uncoachable. They went from the center group to they moved all the way over to I know best. You don't understand this business. You can't help me. I know best. And I'm like, wait. And that was a shocker. And I had a few $100,000 in that deal, and I don't know what's going to ever happen to it.
Yeah. Well, part of it also comes into conjunction with our next part of the topic, with leadership and communication.
So this is the third one.
The third one, but it kind of intertwines here in the sense that you are dealing with an entrepreneur and you see the team he builds around. And let's say he is an A-rated player.
Okay.
But you see B-rated players all around him. That tells you something. That tells you that he doesn't want to be challenged. He wants people who are more yes people and who will just say yes to him and let him do whatever he wants to do. Or it shows you that he doesn't know how to evaluate people and can't pick the right people around him.
Okay.
So that all part of that coachability in the sense that he picks people who are all yes people around him. That probably says something about that he's not very coachable.
Or you've got the other side, which is they have to be the smartest guy in the room. So there's an insecurity factor there.
That is
right?
Correct.
So they might not know how to get attract A players. That's an issue. That's a problem. Because it takes A players to build real big companies.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other side is I just like being the smartest person in the room. So I'm just going to make sure I surround myself with those kind of people. And then you're just going to get it's the Peter principle. You're only going to succeed up until your level of incompetency, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I had one company we invested in before, and as we were making the investment, the CEO heard the VP of sales. I met the VP of sales, and in 2 minutes, I knew he wasn't going to be the right one. Sure enough, 6 months later, he was gone. But that told me something about the entrepreneur. Unfortunately, I was already down the track of getting the investment done, and I listened to my heart and not my gut and went ahead and completed that investment and wound up losing money.
Yeah, because if you have somebody like that, an entrepreneur that's not, like you said, coachable or has those leadership skills and ability to kind of attract people who are as good or if not most likely better than they are, then if they don't have that, it's like you can't coach them into that.
No, you can't. That is something.
It is what you got.
Right, it is, and you have to figure out how to do it.
That's a tough one. Okay. So that's coachability. So first one we had was, having that expertise. The second was coachability. And the third, we talked about leadership, meaning the ability to attract high quality people. But also, does that include communication as a leader?
Well, it does, because you have to be able to communicate with your team to be able to build something. Because if you can't communicate with the team, then you won't get built what you think are going to get built. You won't have something to sell. And you got to be able to communicate with all levels of people, where a VP of marketing, VP of sales, VP of development, and all the people under them. You have to be able to communicate as an entrepreneur and as the leader. If you can't communicate what is trying to be built, then how are you going to get it done? Because you can't always rely on the people under you, particularly if you have built a load of people that are not necessarily the best people.
Yeah, well, one of the things is I also consider here as part of this whole leadership and this communication piece is the soft skills of interpersonal skills, okay? And I always think of Tom Noonan. I still remember I was running an organization called the Technology Executive Roundtable, and it was when Tom came to town, and he had just joined Chris. I talked to Tom Noonan at the sort of the pre-meeting cocktail party, literally for 3 minutes. And I called him the next day and I said, I want to invest in your company. And he had already gotten VCs and you lined up. I was boxed out. Okay. But the reason I want to do that is because his interpersonal skills were second to none. Incredibly gifted communicator.
Yep.
You know, so there's just not choosing the right people or communicating internally, just representing the company. He could netted things out. He would tell stories that showed his level of humility.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't just braggadocious about things,
Yeah.
you know? So you kind of felt like, oh, God, I want to be in business with this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty
Well,
talented.
I had an entrepreneur who I would go in to listen to their pitch presentation. And in 2 minutes, I knew I would never invest in that investor. Their tone, just the way they present it and everything. I just said,
What turned you off?
Could
you put your finger on it?
it was the way they presented, the attitude they had and their voice and everything. It just, the whole
Was
thing
it an arrogance?
Somewhat. And it just turned me off. Because
sometimes they present and there's this distance. It's like you'd be a lucky person to sort of be associated with me, kind of. It's almost a
one
pride.
was somewhat like that, but it was, I don't know, but I just knew in 2 minutes that I wasn't going to invest in that.
Isn't that
and I had to
amazing?
sit there and 18 minutes and listen.
So here's one of the biggest investors in town for early stage companies. And this guy, you didn't even talk about the idea. You just talked about this guy started talking and he just turned you off. Okay. That's the soft skills part. But as an angel investor, you need to be looking for this because when you get invested, like we said, we get married. We're in this thing for 12 years, maybe, sometimes 24 years, right?
That's
So
right.
be like, so you got to pay attention to those things and don't rationalize, well, it's a really good idea, so I could do it anyway, and I'm probably going to have an effect on him. You're not.
No.
All right. So that's the leadership piece. Then you get to, I think, what was it, something you called customer discovery?
Yes. About 10 years ago, when the concept of accelerators got to be a well-known thing, the concept of customer discovery, of doing it before you built your product, came into being. In that, now you go and talk to your potential customers, your channel, whoever else you need to, and you figure out what the real problem is. You no longer assume that you know the problem. Because so many entrepreneurs thought that they knew the problem. They built a solution. They would take it to market. It wasn't the right solution. They came back, rebuilt, went back to the market, probably didn't get it right the second time, come back, build it the third time, and you hope by then you got something that the market wants. That was the old way of doing it. And it used to work.
Yeah, but you're burning money the whole time that you're doing.
Burning money and time.
Okay.
Because I had this happen with a CTO who I had invested in. They did wonderful. We made a great deal. He went and built a second company. I invested in his second company, and he just totally bombed.
Okay.
Because he thought he knew the problem, and he didn't. He totally misread. So the ideal of customer discovery today is that you go, you figure out what the real problem is. And you have to be very careful the way you do that. Because the way you ask questions to potential customers will impact the way they answer back to you. So you have to be kind of neutral. The best way you can be neutral and figure out what the real problem is. Once you know the real problem, then you know what you need to build. So now with the accelerator program, all of them emphasize the customer discovery concept of doing it first.
Didn't this start with that, or was it Stanford? Was it Stanford University professor called Blank?
Yes.
Was that his name?
Yeah. That.
I think he wrote a book on this, but
Right.
you're right about that. When I started hearing about this, I was confused when they say do customer discovery, and most people walk in the wrong way, and the wrong way says, here's this product that I have, and here's what it does. Would you find this helpful in your business? And people go, yeah, that's pretty neat. And then, of course, you go and you build this thing, and then they go, yeah, I told you it was pretty neat, but I wouldn't pay you for that, right? The other side says, how do you, I remember remember a guy named Bob Lasher?
Oh, I remember Bob.
Yeah, Bob. He was a very well-respected software sales guy in mid-market sales mostly. And he did move into Dun & Bradstreet, I think, and MSA for a while. But Bob, I used to say to Bob, I said, he was doing customer discovery long before customer discovery was in vogue. And I said, Bob, like when you were selling to CPAs, that's where we first met up when he joined us, when he was a young man. He was like 22 years old. And I said, you go to these people, and he was always successful with it. He hit his numbers year in and year out. He worked his way all the way to being the national sales manager for us. I said, you go into CPAs, you don't know anything about CPAs. And I said, how did you sell these people? How did you get to the problem? I used to just, when we got on a topic, I would just ask him, well, how do you do it now? It was a simple thing. He started selling calculators. Okay. And he would walk in and say, how do you do it now? When you do all these numbers and these calculations with multiplying and dividing, how do you do it now? And they would show him on the manual, the electronic, remember the calculators? They go boom, 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 boom. So if you wanted to multiply it 20 times 100, it'd bum, 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 bum. And he said, hey, look at this. He had an electronic calculator, and they go, oh my God, that's fabulous. But the question of how do you do it now without any discussion about your solution or your idea on how they might do it, just listen.
Yeah.
Is that customer discovery?
Yeah, that customer discovery. But you got to be careful and not influence what they tell you, because you might ask the questions a certain way.
Right.
Which might generate a certain response.
So you prejudice the question. You prejudice the answer.
Right.
Wow. But how do you learn how to do that? How do you identify if the entrepreneur is good at customer discovery? Because that's what we're talking about here.
It's hard. Well, one you have to see whether or not they have done it, because sometimes they just don't do it. And I have had entrepreneurs tell me, "Oh yeah, I talked to a dozen people around the corner." Now, that's not customer discovery. And I have had others tell me, oh, I talked to 1,000. Well, you had to talk to that many. It probably would say that you didn't hear what you wanted to hear. So you just had to kind of figure out, and you had to figure out who they talk to, because they are really two types of customers. They are the technology-centric customers, and then they are your ordinary customers. Well, all you talk to are the technology-centric one that are technology-oriented anyway and will try technology. Those are the only people you talk to. You're going to get a different answer than you talk to your general customers. So you got to have a blended set.
The difference between those two, though, is one the technology guy might like it, but the buyer is a non-technology buyer.
Right. And so you got to have a combination of those two balanced in your customer delivery.
That makes sense.
And so you have to do that. So you can kind of tell by letting them talk to you about what they did in customer delivery.
Okay.
And then again, they come back to a gut feel. Does it sound right? Does it sound like he had the right group of potential customers? If he's going to be selling through the channel, did he talk to any channel partners? If he didn't talk to any channel partner, and yet that's going to be his major element of sales, he missed the whole part of the market then.
What do you say? What if, you're talking to me and I'm an entrepreneur and you're like, did you do customer discovery? So why do I need to do customer discovery? I'm already generating $25,000 a month in sales. I've got customers that are doing it, and we're kind of growing like month on month by, 50%. So why do I need to do customer discovery? I'm being successful already. I just need your money so that I can grow faster.
Well, one, you are already late in doing customer discovery, so at this point it might not work.
But
More
doesn't
about
revenue prove customer acceptance?
no.
Okay. Tell me that. Tell me about that.
Well, again, you get your tech-centric companies, they might pay for it because they try all the technologies. So you might get money out of them, but your big market, you might not sell any of them. So it depends on who the money coming from. But coming back to your original question, it's more about what did you do before you built the product? How did you know what to build? And if they just said, well, I just determined to build it and did this, then that tell you they did not do customer discovery. Then you had to go on and evaluate, well, what is the quality of the revenue you got? What kind of pipeline do you have? You may make 25,000 a month now, but can you get up to 100,000 a month or 200? How do you get there? And they don't have a way of really telling you how they can get there. That probably said that the market, they haven't done the right thing in the market. And
when they get to that, that's usually what it is just a spreadsheet effort, right? How do I get there? They just multiply percentages. Right. They've got to just get stepping it up. But you're saying, they might have, they might be able to do 25 a month. They might even be able to do 100,000 a month, but they might just absolutely top out at a $1.2 million business, and there's no money in that either, right? So you can't be fooled by just some traction.
No, you cannot.
And that's why you still have to do customer discovery.
Entrepreneurs keep asking, well, how many customers do I need to show you that I got market traction? And so I said, there's no set number. It depends on the product. It depends on the pricing. It depends on who the customer. Depends on the number of factors. You might have some people can get away with 20 customers. Some company might need 100 customers to prove it. It varies on the way. If you don't do customer discovery, then you're doing yourself, your employees, and your investor a disservice.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think, and I'll end with this on customer discovery, do you think that customer discovery is something that should be a part of a continuous process with your company, or sort of a one and done, we build it and go?
No, it is a continuing process. I'm not sure I would call it customer discovery. It's keeping up with where the market is going.
Okay.
Not so much customer, I don't think. Where market is going. You may remember our first investment together.
Yeah.
That company pivoted 5 times.
Right.
Because he kept trying to find where the market was going. So it wasn't true customer discovery at pivot number 3, 4, and 5. He was just trying to figure out where the market was moving to, because it was moving in a different direction than people originally anticipated.
Yeah, I like that. What I call that is you don't, as an angel investor, you don't want to be in that company that is doing Monday morning strategy meetings. You're whiteboarding again on Monday morning. So who are we going to try to sell to this week?
Yep.
Because I've already got a product. Now I got to figure out who I'm selling to this week, because last week we didn't sell anything. So we got to find somebody else.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the on the ground customer discovery that will cost an investor a fortune, which happened in that company. They just kept raising more and more and more money. To the point where they just exhausted the current investors, and then they couldn't find any new ones. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so that's the customer discovery. So expert, coachability, leadership, customer discovery. What do you got next?
Competition.
Boy, okay.
I am a big proponent that if you don't know your competition, then you don't know your market.
That's a great simple definition, but is it true?
Yes, because how can you know your market if you don't know your competition? And in my view, there are two types of competitors. You got the competitor today, and you got the competitors tomorrow. And as part of looking at the competitors today, if you tell me that there are no competitors out there, then I would ask you, well, do you really have a market? Or is it just that the market is more of a niche market and not very big, and people are not wanting to go to it? Because they are very, very few true markets where you would build a product and not have some sort of competition. And you've got to know who that competition is. I had in 4 weeks, in 1 month, back in the 90s, I had 5 different companies that were all doing the same thing, all based in Atlanta, come to me and tell me they had no competition. And that wasn't counting the competition that were probably being done in the Valley or in Oakland. All 5 of those companies were based here, and they didn't know anything about.
Were they all in the same market? Oh my gosh! So they didn't know each other,
Right.
and yet they were all saying that no one's doing this but me.
Right.
How about that?
That went to show that they didn't do a good job of analysis on competition. They should have been able to find at least one or the other.
What do you learn? What do you learn as an entrepreneur by knowing your competition?
Well, one, you know their market there. So you got competition, that helped validate it.
Okay.
You can get pricing information about how your competitor are selling and under what term. And those are the two biggest things that you get. You get market validation, and you get some idea of pricing and terms, because you don't want to be out there trying to sell $1 million package where everybody else is selling a SaaS model and selling monthly subscription, because you don't want to try to upset the market by going in with something so totally new in the way you're selling it that everybody has to change what they're doing.
No, that's excellent, because I think one of the things that's somebody's printing something here. One of the things that's, I think, important that you said is market validation, but also pricing. And when you get to pricing, what it tells you what the market will pay for the solution. And it's very hard to disrupt that unless you can come in more economically favorably, right? So you can charge less. That's different. But if this is what they'll pay for the solution, then you can put an economic model together, say, hey, can I make money doing this?
Right.
I mean, I could sell at the same level, but now we're all losing money. I mean, that's not a good solution.
No, but that helps you also look at I want to charge $25 for it, and everybody else charging $75. Why am I charging so low?
Yeah, that's it.
And they'll say, yes, I'm trying to buy the market or get into it. Well, but people will also look at it that you're charging so much, it might not be as good as the others. So do I even want to try? So you have to have some idea of the market range. Now, you also have to look at who your future competitors could be, because between the Microsofts and the Googles of the world and some of the other companies out there, if you are trying to get into a market where you know they are on the fringe of the market, and you know that they are inclined to build it themselves rather than buy, then you have to figure out, well, am I prepared if they decide to come into market? What would I need to do to be better than they would be? Or how would I approach the market if they chose to come into the market?
Yeah.
Or
that's the future competitor one.
Right. Or the other case might be that, depending on your product, I have had a company that built something that basically solved the problem of Microsoft. Well, Microsoft decided that that rather than having you do it, they decided to come in and buy you. And they gave you a lowball price and said, if you don't take it, we'll go buy a competitor and run you out of business. So you had to gauge where you think the market might go if somebody decided to come into it.
And you got to be objective about it, which is a hard thing to do.
Yes.
That if this happens, and the first thing that you say is, "Oh, that'll never happen. They'll never do that." Right? But it certainly is a threat. One of the stories I remember is back in the PC days, okay? This would have been in the late 80s, is there was a company in California that was doing, because PCs, remember those disks were always getting full. And so what they did, this is under Windows, and what they did is they sold this defragmenting software, right? So it would go through the disk and reorder everything, and all of a sudden you would free up, 100 megabytes of space or whatever. And Microsoft went to them. They were owning the market. It was just absolutely incredible how fast they were growing. And Microsoft came in and said, "We think the business is worth that." And they said, "No, it's not. It's worth a lot more than that." And they said, "Well, if you don't take this, we're going to build it." And Microsoft built it, and that company went from thinking they were worth this to literally going out of business, because you can't compete with free. It was included free as part of the operating system. And Microsoft was saying, "Well, we can use yours. You've got it figured out. But if you don't want to pay for it, we're willing to pay this. If not, we'll just do it ourselves and you'll be gone." And they were gone.
No.
They were gone. So that's the competition. That's an argument for competition, and you got to be sharp enough on that.
Now, I remember a hardware company out in Texas. They developed a PC that they could ship to your home for $1,000.
Okay.
And the CEO said, nobody will mash it because nobody will come down that low. Took them about 6 months. And they were 3 different ones that came in at the same price. That company went away very quickly.
Yeah. So you got to be honest and objective about what future competition will really be the threat. I think that's, part of this whole, go back to customer discovery for a minute, the whole thing there is testing what assumptions that you're making. A lot of what we do is we say, well, this is what we're going to do, and this is why it's going to work. And you say, oh, let's go back to what assumptions are you making in order for you to do this forecast? And then you got to test those assumptions. And that's what that, like Flashpoint, for example, that was all about testing those assumptions. You just can't say things like, well, they're going to love this.
And see, Flashpoint was the first accelerator here that adopted customer disclosure.
That's right. And they made a big difference. So I like that idea, though, on the competition. So it's a red flag for you if somebody entrepreneur says, "I don't have any competition." And you go, okay, well, that either means that you just don't understand the market, or there's no market there. That's basically what you just said.
You're right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what's after competition?
Right. Now, that the only qualifier there, Charlie, you could have a niche market that's not very big that nobody wants to play in because you're not going to make very much money. So they can be a market there, but it could be very tiny, and therefore nobody really want to go out with it because they can't build a big enough business.
Right. So it's going to be a $2 million business, and you'll make some money and be able to provide for your family, but you shouldn't be attracting investors because they'll never get their money out. Right. Because you're going to value it too high. That makes a lot of sense. All right. So that's competition. So now we got experts, coachability, leadership, customer discovery, competition. What's next?
The next one is one of talking about how you socialize the ideal with your significant other. Being an entrepreneur, particularly if you have come out of the corporate world, you are used to a paycheck, you are used to benefits, you are used to not killing yourself working all the time. You lose a good part of that when you become an entrepreneur. an entrepreneur get very low pay generally. They have significantly less benefits, and they don't get to take near the time out that they would have in the corporate world. So the question is, have you talked to your significant other about what the impact on the quality of life that y'all are going to lead is going to be? Now, if your wife or husband has a good job, good benefit, and all of this, it might not be that big a deal. But if they don't, what happened when you are a year into this or 6 months into it, and you happen to have a baby, your wife might not be working anymore, it's your only source of income, you have not set aside a lot of money and savings or whatever, is your significant other prepared to live with these kind of environmental issues until you can get the company up and running? Sometimes entrepreneurs forget to talk to their significant other. Or if they do, they don't really go into the details on
Well,
them.
maybe some of these first-time entrepreneurs, like you say, coming out of corporate, they don't understand this, what it's really going to be like and how hard it really is going to be. And I've done this, I've had these sort of conversations now I would bring, Kathy and I would actually have dinner, with the two couples, okay? And the answer we would always get was, well, if Sig wants to do it, I love Sig, and I just want him to be happy. And that was the answer from the spouse. And I would say, no, you don't. One, I don't know if Sig is going to be happy when he doesn't, because this is going to be really hard. But the second thing is, you don't know the sacrifices that you're going to be asked to make, the lonely nights that you're going to have, the boredom that you're going to have when your husband or your wife, all they think about 7/24 is getting this company out of the ground and getting it to cash flow positive. I mean, that is horrendous. The investor meetings that are going to come up, the board meetings, going to shows to reach the market, meeting with customers. I mean, my God, it's all on his or her back. How do you communicate that? Or how should an entrepreneur communicate that to his spouse?
Well,
Or you said
unfortunately,
significant other, okay?
the entrepreneur has to know how to do it, because I don't know his significant other.
Well, how do you, these are criteria. This is the X factor. And you're saying this is a criteria. How do you know if the guy did it? What does he say to you? He says, hey, Sig, she's fine with it.
Then I would probably ask, well, how much did you really tell her or him?
Okay. And what would you expect him to say?
I would hope that he had talked through at least how much more work they will be involved in and does she understand what benefits they don't have or won't have unless she has them or he, It all about, you have to be careful because the government you got to stay within government guidelines of what you can and cannot ask people about. So you have to do it in just a more general manner. But it is significant because I had a CEO that his wife had a second child and she was just overwhelmed at home and he was overwhelmed at work. And she basically gave him an ultimatum that something had to change. And luckily we were able to work out where it worked out. But if it had, I could have lost the CEO. And that would have been
because now he had to make a decision between his wife and his kids or you, right? As investor.
Right. And, and he was the founder. He was the one who had the ideal. So he was critical to the business. So to have lost him would have just killed the business.
That is so hard. That is so hard. But that is a real X factor criteria. You do have to have, I have had situations where, two different situations. One, where the founder winds up in a divorce.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You got divorce, you've got custody, you got all these issues that happened. The family's blowing up, right? The in-laws, everybody. And he's trying to run this business. He's still not the profitability, and there's no one to step in. He still has to be the guy.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's one. And the other one is, or if a child becomes a wayward child, they get, God forbid they get into drugs or alcohol, they get into massive depression or whatever those issues are. Now you're choosing between your kid
And
and the business, right?
right.
How do you?
Yeah.
So some of this you can plan as best you can,
Yeah.
or ask those questions, and some of it you just get surprised by.
But, and it applied to not only younger entrepreneurs, people who come out of the corporate world, that been in the corporate world for 10, 20 years. One of the first thing I asked them is, my friend, is how much do you have to live on? And I have had some people come out and say, oh, I need $300,000 a year. That's the minimum that I can take. And I have said, well, you don't need to be an entrepreneur because you're not going to make that kind of money. And he actually sincerely thought he would be able to make that kind of money as an entrepreneur from day one. And he just couldn't. That is the other side of it, is that you have people who are older, who are used to a certain lifestyle, and they just can't change. And so they shouldn't be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I asked, one of my questions was always is, yeah, go ahead, plug your computer in.
Yeah.
So one of the things I got to was asking the question is, how much cash do you need to live on every month? And some of them don't even know. So I said, well, let's go through and come up with a budget here. Let's start with, how much are you spending on your mortgage, and how much are you spending on food and going out, and how much do you have clubs you belong to? Do your kids go to private schools? How many cars do you have? And you start adding all that up, and all of a sudden you realize they need $15,000 a month to keep floating the family. Well, that puts you at $300,000 a year.
Yeah, it does.
Right?
Get there very quick.
And so I said, look, if what you're going to be making here is going to be, $8,000 a month take home, let's say, you've got a deficit of $7,000. You know where that's coming from? That's coming from your savings account. Well, that's just not going to work for me. I'm good. Okay, it won't work for you.
If it doesn't work for you, then you don't need to work for be an entrepreneur. Go back to corporate.
I do say that if your lifestyle gets out of hand, no matter what occupation you're in, it absolutely limits your options going forward. It certainly limits your options on entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it does.
There was a guy that was a federal judge here that wrote a book to lawyers, and it was the same thing. They said, if you start living your lifestyles, as you become more and more successful and get to partnership, if you're living at those levels, you need that $1 million a year to live or whatever, you can't take volunteer positions or government positions, for example, to work for an administration or whatever, because you can't afford it.
Right.
You got to keep, so don't live to that lifestyle. Don't live up to your income. Leave room so you can do other things that you get called to do that you would find to be lifelong interesting, you see?
You are. Yep.
So it happens there. It happens everywhere. So that's a good one. Okay. So there we go. So now we have, what one was that? That was just part of the significant other talk.
Yeah.
Right?
We're down to number 7. I guess 7.
Number 7. Entrepreneur needs to do due diligence too.
You're right. Because not all angel investors or all VCs operate in the same way. So you need to do a due diligence on your potential investors as they do on you. So you need to know, you need to know how they operate, how done with other entrepreneurs. So talk to some of the other people they have invested in. What did they do during periods of down? Let's say you have a down quarter or you miss a goal. how do they behave? Do they support you? Do they want to sell out immediately? Do they push you to sell the company? What is their long-term goal? Are they in it for the long term, or do they want to be out in 2 years? So you need to know all of that about your investor. How do they work with other investors? How they co-invested with people before? Because co-investors need to be able to work together. And you need to know how your investor is going to behave, particularly if he's a board member. Is he going to be supportive, or he not going to be if things don't go right? All of that you need to know about.
If it doesn't go right, is he going to try to get rid of you right away?
Right.
But it could just be tremendously stressful.
Yeah.
And
so
you got the thing where, do you have investors who are, like you said, invested with other people? Because that investor cooperation is give and take. But if you have somebody that's just take, his shares could be enough that you can't do what you really are trying to get done that needs to be done in the business.
Right. And how will they support you if things do go not the best? Are they going to be willing to help support to raise more money if you can show them the way it can go, and that you can prove that you can take it that way? Or do they want, like you were saying, do they want to kick you out immediately on day 2 if something goes bad? So you need to do all of that due diligence on the investor.
And how do you, again, if you're a second-time entrepreneur, they certainly do that. If you're a first-time entrepreneur, you just think money's money.
Well, yeah, because
I don't even know what questions to ask except, are you going to invest?
Yeah. Or when do I get the money in the bank?
When do I get?
And so you do have to do that. And every
who can help an first-time entrepreneur with that, to kind of think through that?
You got a good attorney; he will help you with that.
Good, yeah.
And I'm a big believer in that you should have a good attorney early on in the process. And when I say a good attorney, I mean an attorney who knows about early stage entrepreneurial type companies. Not every corporate attorney understand what it is to be an entrepreneur or how to build an entrepreneurial business. I had one deal where I was investing in it, and he had already gotten all his docs put together by an attorney. We had to totally redo every doc because every one of them had problems from the entrepreneurial level in it. So we wound up just redoing all of his docs. You don't want to have to do that. Plus, a good entrepreneurial attorney will have connections in the community. He'll know angel investors. He'll know VCs. He'll know people who you should be maybe putting on your advisory board. He can help you with all of that.
Yeah, a good attorney like that who's in the community, that startup, he will also connect you to people that he believes are compatible with you. Yeah, so there's he's just not going to throw a bunch of investors at you. He puts it out to people that he thinks, first of all, this angel investor likes this industry, okay, or this kind of a business or whatever it might be. And he's faith-based or he's non-faith-based, or seems to be a patient investor and this guy's going to need patience, whatever it might be. But I like that. It could be angel investor is looking to just get involved with the business and, be sort of an engaged sort of chairman maybe, or an engaged board member, at a higher level of engagement.
And that when I say get the attorney early in the cycle. Now, I know money is generally tight. Most attorneys will figure out a way to work with you. But a good early stage attorney, I think, is very critical to the business.
Now, I like that. Okay, so the entrepreneur, you look or encourage entrepreneurs, this X factor is, again, the entrepreneur it shows some maturity and understanding of money isn't free. It not only comes with terms, but it also comes with personalities and values.
Sure.
And objectives, right? And that's where it gets a little nasty. And so I think that's a That's a great, that shows some level of maturity, which is important. Okay. So we got expertise. Okay. And 2 was coachability. 3 was leadership communications. 4 was they do customer discovery. 5 is competition. 6 is spouse or significant other sort of understanding and commitment, co-commitment, if you will. And this last one was the entrepreneur should be doing as much due diligence on the investors as they're doing on him or her. So that brings you to number 8.
That is the entrepreneur understand and accept that one day he might not be leading the company. Entrepreneurs need to understand that as you grow the company, it takes a different level of management skills to grow. Some entrepreneurs can take it from 0 to 1 million. Some of them can take it from 0 to 5 million. Some of them can go from 0 to 10 million. But at some point, June, you are probably going to need to bring in a CEO to run the company, somebody who knows how to grow a company, not just build it, but to grow. And you need to be honest with yourself in that you need to be willing to step aside and maybe not have the CEO title. Maybe you have the CTO title, maybe you have a CSO title or something, but you may have to not be the person ultimately in charge. And it's important that you think about that early on, because it comes back to part of egos and everything else that entrepreneurs have, and where you are an A player or a B player.
Is your experience that the entrepreneur in reality, intellectually, I go, oh yeah, that makes total sense to me as the entrepreneur. Of course, I'll know when to step aside. Okay. Now, entrepreneurs are built to think they could slay any dragon that you put in front of them. Okay. So so when that time comes, it's usually going to be the board of directors, depending upon how formalized, their capital structure is, or it's going to be your investors are going to say, you're not the right guy to run this thing or the right gal to run this. So to the person, I can't believe anybody's going to say, oh yeah, you're right, I'll step aside. What's been the reality of this for you? You've been in 200 companies here.
The reality is you have to convince them when you are the investor or the board or both, when you determine that, then you have to sit down and really have a heart-to-heart with the entrepreneur. And it generally takes more than one sitting down to talk to them. I would say probably half of the time you can convince them, about half of the time, sometimes you have to physically, well, I shouldn't say physical, you have to legally force.
Yeah, you got to make the decision for them, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And that is when you hope that you and the investors have done a good job. I had one company where, unfortunately, we had 4 people on the board, and 2 were company and 2 were investors, and it came time to kick the CEO out. Well, that was a little hard to do because you had a 2-way draw. You had the 2 company people say no, you had the 2 investors say yeah, and we had to do some manipulating and some legal maneuvering to be able to make things happen.
Because you were convinced, as the 2 investors, this isn't going to work.
Oh, there was no question.
See, and all the time that it's not working, you're burning money.
You're burning money?
Or you're burning opportunity, right? I mean, it's going to be one or the other. Yeah, or both. There you go. And we did have this happen in one of my companies, and the person the founder stayed. Now here's what, and he had a significant position in the company, but he stayed, and there was a new CEO brought in over the founder, and that lasted probably 3 years. And every day, I found this out after, okay, but every day of those 3 years, that founder was fairly uncooperative and totally resentful of having had that done, but the company was doing so well, he stuck around, right? But that's not a good situation either, again.
No,
But
no, not.
it needed to happen. Now you
Right.
look back 20 years later, they've been sold and everything else. He's now mature, started and running another company and going, yeah, that was right back then, but he was in his 30s. I mean, he didn't
Yeah,
know.
no. But I will say that they are one thing that he needs to do. Well, the two things. One, he need to not resist. But two, he need to participate in figuring out who is the right person to bring in. Because investors don't always bring in the right people. They're being very honest.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
And so if he will just cooperate and maybe be involved in the hiring of the new person, he can help guide the way it goes.
Yeah, but this is just a tough situation no matter which way you cut it, right? I mean, so so what I don't understand, if this is in one of those sort of X factors for a fundable entrepreneur, how do you get past this to say, okay, I'm going to check this box that he understands he might not be CEO for the entirety?
It again come back to a gut call from having talked to the entrepreneur, having worked with him doing due diligence, and just talking to him about running the company and about what his goals are. If if he does have a significant ego, then that come back to coachability. And does that mean that he is really going to be willing to step aside? If he got something ego that he got to be always the one making all the decisions and doing everything, then that one is one that you then had the investors, you have to figure out how big a chance are you willing to take that he'll help you when you need it.
I think another one might be, those are great points. I think another great point would be or another point, I don't know if it's great, is entrepreneurs are people and they need to know that you're in it for them. You care about them. You could even use the word love them. You do. You love them and you care about them and you love their family and you want it to be right. You want this dream to be a reality and you're going to work with them and build that relationship. So now you're coming to them as somebody who, over 5 years has, they have proved to be tremendously in their corner and trustworthy. That has to help, as opposed to not understanding and just making a sort of an objective decision, if you will. So you've got to be able to, I think from the investor standpoint, you've got to be willing to invest in them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
and you've always done that. Always done that.
Well, it is a joint thing because we both have this, hopefully the same object of building an outstanding company and increasing value and everybody doing what.
And now what we have is a disagreement on who should lead it. Yeah, that's okay. All right. So now we got through 8. So again, what's the X factor number 9 for this?
What is the entrepreneurial dominant skill set? In other words, as an entrepreneur, particularly on the non-technical entrepreneur,
Yep.
are you a visionary who can create ideals and who can see visions and can picture market? Or are you somebody that can run the business and run it day to day to make sure everything gets done, that the product gets shipped, that the customer remain happy? Which one are you? If you are a thinker, and you and I both know one in particular, that he is great at coming up with ideals, he's great at vision, but he has to have a number 2 behind him on the business side to operate the business, because he can't run day to day. He's not the one to hurry people. He's not the one to figure out what problem need to be solved each day. And he's not the technical.
I call those guys the guys that are really good at keeping the trains on time.
Right. And so
that's a different skill set, boy, than a visionary strategy person.
Right.
The visionary strategy guy, just as an idea, is or an observation for me, is somebody who he just says people should just do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's his answer to how to operate a company. There is no management. Okay. You don't manage people. You don't set goals. You don't keep people accountable to go. They just need to do what they should be doing. And of course, that fails. And that's the visionary strategist, if you will.
And if
you
you
call
are
him
a
the thinker?
divisionary,
Is that what you call him?
yeah, thinker. And
Okay.
if you are that person, then you need to have a third co-founder in the company who is the operator, who is the business person. Because you're going to have the technician over here. You are the thinker and big picture person, and you'll be coming up with all kinds of ideas. But then you got to have somebody behind you to operate.
So you got to have co-founders, okay, which is going to be the person that understands what was that, number 2 or so, person the expert. They have to be an expert in the industry, in the market, and then you have the technology expert in the tech, right, the platform. Now you've got to make sure that as you're evaluating this company, is there somebody who's the visionary thinker, if you will, and we know who the tech person is, but who's the operator, right? Who's going to make sure that everything gets done and the goals that we set are actually hit?
Right. But now an operator can be a thinker if he is not truly purely visionary. An operator he may come up with the basic idea.
Yeah.
It may just be a one-time type idea. An operator can do that, or a technical person can do that. The true visionary is somebody who can't do the operation or the technical. And if you want to go, you need 2 co-founders.
And, they can, I always say this to people is somebody isn't all like visionary. Yeah, they can get stuff done too, right? They could be the operator. But what you really got to get to is, like you say, dominant skill, right? In other words, what is it that you really enjoy doing, that when you think this is where I want to spend my time? Yeah, I can do the management and get things done, but I just don't like doing it, but I'll do it. Well, that's not the guy that's going to do it long term.
No.
Whereas, I remember I was partners on some deals with a guy called Reggie Campbell. I don't know if you remember him.
I remember Reggie.
Reggie made a comment to me after we worked in one deal, and he said, Charlie's the what guy, and I'm the how guy. See, I remember one time we were sitting in a room, and this is with the entrepreneur, and we were talking about how do you build out a sales force. But I came to the point where I said, I went to this show, and here's where we are, and here's the kind of sales force that we need, and here's the distribution that we need to put in place and all that. And everybody went, yeah, that's really good. Well, I was done. And then Reggie stepped in and said, let me show you how to do it. And I remember he filled the board with the how to do it. Mm-hmm. And I sat back and I said, I have none of that. That was great. And that's what you need to run a company. You need both of those, because Reggie needed somebody to tell him what needed to be done strategically, but he could figure out how to execute. It was unbelievable. So that's what you need. That's combination. I like that. And so that's number 9, that dominant skill. And then you get to number 10, another difficult one.
Number 10, the one that not all investors and all entrepreneurs agree upon.
Okay.
Is having no family members in the company.
Okay.
Basically, investors, at least from my viewpoint, are concerned about will it cloud the judgment of the entrepreneur. If he got a brother, sister, or a dad, or all of those in the company, what happens when one of them need to go? And what happens if the board or the investors tell the entrepreneur one of them got to go, and the entrepreneur doesn't agree? So, you can run yourself into
my brother. He's doing a good job. I'll tell him to kind of pick it up.
Right. Yeah, and that doesn't work. And so that is why I tend to not invest in a company that has those relationships in the company. Now, I did do one. I have had an exception to the rule, and it worked. But it worked for a particular reason because the husband and the wife, one was technical and one was management, and they both knew their position and they both did a good job. Had one of them not, I don't know what the results were.
So you never got into a situation where that uncomfortable situation, look, which is your wife's really not pulling the load here. Okay.
Yeah. No, I never got into that, and I'm glad I didn't. But, I have turned down a number of companies over the years, not because I didn't like the company or the entrepreneur, but just because of that potential relationship that could develop. Because, what do you do if you got a husband, wife, brother, sister, whatever combination, and one don't have to go, and then the other one decide to leave at the same time, and yet you need that one to build the business.
Yeah, because I look at this, I wonder that one of the things that I think is difficult here too is, it impacts some of the other things that we talked about, okay? And one of those is, can he attract A players? Well, maybe I can't. Maybe what I think is an A player isn't going to want to be on a management team with relatives because there's no objectivity there. I know that somebody else might not have to perform at the same level I am, and they're going to wind up in a better, more favored position and all, or my opinions aren't going to matter because you two go to bed at night and talk to each other about this thing. It's not part of the management team. Okay. So that's all the difficulty that's in this thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the most recent companies I looked at, it was the entrepreneur, his brother, and his dad, all three in the company. And I liked the company. I liked what they were doing. I liked the entrepreneur, but I just could not get over what would have happened if I had to tell one of them to slaughter one of the others. I just don't think it would have happened, and then that would have created a real nightmare.
So I think people can intuit the issues around this. Of course, the people that start companies that have family members in there, it's never a problem, right? They'll always say, it's not a problem. If they don't perform, we'll get rid of them. Don't worry about that. It's just, we're totally objective. And you're like, I don't believe that. Blood is thicker than water, right?
Yeah. Well, and the key problem is when they disagree with you on why one should go. If they come up with the reason why one should go, it's a lot easier. But if you had the investor come to them and say, your brother just got to go, that he is just not carrying his load, and you disagree, then, nothing
but then,
good can
and
come
here's
out.
the other thing, you get into your brother's not carrying the load, and basically he was really good as whatever the position was, till you got to about $2.5 million in sales. But, he's kind of topped out, and we need to get somebody else that's going to do this. So he's not going to make it. And no, he'll pick it up. You'll see, he'll learn, it's just, you just can't get past it. And then you're stuck. And now you're into this power play kind of a deal. This is almost feels like that piece of you can't be the CEO forever.
Right.
It's all in that same mess.
All in the same vein.
So so you have these 10 X factors. If you have these 10 factors met, then the entrepreneur is clearly fundable. Okay? Let's just say that.
Well,
but you never get, what?
The entrepreneur is fundable, but the company might still not be fundable if you don't have the right market.
Yeah, I'm with that, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the entrepreneur. So there's 10 criteria here. Nobody hits 10 out of 10.
You're right.
Nobody. And if you rate them, and there's not a yes, no, it's not a 0, 1, it's a scale. Every one of those is a scale, right? So how do you I know that you didn't hit all 10 of these on these last 20 investments. Okay. So how do I make those decisions? What do I do?
Really, it's
Do I
a pure
rate these?
a gut call.
Gut call. Okay.
It is a qualitative, not quantitative decision. So you go through and look at each of them and figure out how you feel. Just think about it as which side do they fall? Is it more positive or more negative?
Okay.
And you just kind of put that all together and mix it up and decide what comes out, Because some things are probably like number 10. Number 10 to me is a deal killer.
Which is the no family members. Right.
Right. That is a deal killer.
So it's either they're in there or they're not.
Right.
Right.
Right. And so if they're not going to change that, then I don't have to worry about it because that's
So
your
that's
killer.
weighted higher than some of the others.
Yes, because that is a real problem. But
So
you look at you think about co-founder series. Yep, they are trying to build something in an industry that they don't know about. That get weighed pretty highly too, because that is probably a pretty good item that they won't be successful. Leadership, you probably, depending on how bad the leadership analysis is. Like if he surrounds himself with a combination of A and B players, it's not a bad A, they are all B players. Competition, if he doesn't know competition, then that's a pretty big issue, particularly if he doesn't acknowledge that he needs no competition. That one will carry a lot of the weight. Probably, I don't count so much on their significant other, because that's their problem. It might become mine. If only I have made them aware that it is a potential problem.
And you insisted that they talk to their significant other.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And if they choose not to do due diligence on the investor, and they get caught, then it's up to me to be sure that I know who are the other investors. Because see, that the other thing, right, with me, I need to know who their other investors are so that I can also look at.
Yeah, because you don't want to be stuck with somebody that disagrees with you all the time either, or gives the entrepreneur a hard time. Yeah, it's not the way you do business.
Right, and so all of them have different kind of weightings based upon where you are. Customer delivery, if they already are generating 100,000 a month in income or something, well, you can probably discount customer delivery, but then you look at what is their pipeline, how are they growing, so you kind of substitute maybe something for customer delivery in there. See, most time I didn't have that problem because most of my company I invested in didn't have revenue, not anything over 100,000 a month. So I didn't really have that too much. So,
well, that's a good way to do it. So you kind of go through it based on your experience as an investor. You go through each one of these 10 and then you rank them. You say these 3 are deal breakers. These 3, they got to score high in that area. And these last 4, they got to be at least in the middle or, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, they need to be at least a 3. Okay. And so you kind of weight it around, but it could be that some combination could make it a deal breaker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I say number 10 is a deal breaker. I won't even go through 1 through 9 on a company.
So that's that's the highest level, most important one. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. I will walk away from a company because
that's
of
great.
that and won't hesitate to do that. The one other thing I would like to throw in somewhere in co-founder expertise or leadership, don't be afraid to be passionate about what you are doing, the work you are doing. I'm not saying to be a passionate person, wanting to hug everybody or whatever, but be passionate about what you're trying to build. That is part of the overall, co-founder, leadership, communication. Be passionate. Enjoy, show that you want to build a company around what you do.
Yeah. If you're not excited about it, why should I get excited about it? Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that was, again, he was, Tom Noonan. I mean, he was stoked, man. He was all over it. And the people that I've run into that really are believers in it, they are passionate about it. You're
Yep.
right about that.
Yeah. And so that is important.
And that's a flame that's hard to put out if it's authentic.
Right.
It's like a calling from God. I know I should be doing this and I love it. So I wouldn't do anything else. One of the things that always we also hear, and this is something I always looked for, is I looked for people who would sort of burn the ships, die on the hill people. In other words, they're in it. They're not, there's no, oh, I did it for a while. I didn't know it'd be this hard. I'm going to quit. No, once the money's in, you take the money. You can't leave.
Yeah.
You got to keep going.
Yeah.
So how do you, that again, maybe that falls under leadership, with the passion and all that. But how do you evaluate? Because I know you look for that too. They got to be all in.
Oh, yeah, they do, Well, one that can't work for anybody else, that is one of the kind of details questions. He is trying, I talked to somebody a week ago who was flirting 2 startups at the same time. I said, well, if you ever want to get funding, you need to get with one of the 2 companies. But you're not going to get funded while you are CEO of 2 startups. That just won't happen.
And then the guy brings up, but Elon Musk is running 5 companies.
Yeah. Well, not everybody in Elon Musk, and not everybody had the money to do what he wants to do. So you just, there's something you just had to,
I love that. Not everybody's Elon Musk. I remember back in the early 2000s, everybody thought they were Bill Gates.
Yeah. No,
I mean, you talk about 1 in a million, a guy that can take it from scratch and build it into a multi-billion-dollar company. He was amazing. And he was a visionary and an operator. I mean, he was that for a while. Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how much an operator she really is.
So
I think they are people.
Steve Ballmer, I guess, was more operating. And,
right.
Yeah.
He was the Gates. But,
he was the sales guy, too. He built the channels out.
Right. But you look at Elon Musk, I think he has people in every one of those companies that are actually running the company. I think he
has to. He has to.
He is the visionary and thinker of all of those, because he comes up with electric car going out to space, electronic battery. He just comes up with it all. So he is the visionary, and he has somebody down in there. He may not call them co-founders, but they are in there doing the day-to-day and making sure. I can assure you, Elon couldn't tell you why they only deliver X number of cars in a month or whatever. He would never do that. And one other thing, Charlie, I got thinking about, the entrepreneur, whenever he is talking to an investor or doing an investor pitch, if you don't know the answer to the question, don't try to make up an answer on the side. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know, but I will find out and get back to you. Because 9 times out of 10, if you try to make up something, it will be wrong. And the investor will figure that out.
That has to go to coachability too, where we talked about that. Yeah, these soft skills all sort of interact with each other. And I look for humility.
Yeah.
And somebody who's humble, you got to balance humility and confidence. Okay. You can't just be totally humble. Like, oh, I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. Right. And you can't be totally confident because so you got to balance the humility and confidence in order for you to be a good leader. That's the way it works. Yeah. That's a good point. You brought that up. I'm glad you did. Well, this is great. I love these 10 X factors for a fundable entrepreneur. All right. These are high bars for investors to look for, and these are going to be high bars for entrepreneurs to kind of live up to. But I think the fact that you built this through all of your experience, they'll have that it's good to have the awareness of these points, okay, versus, oh, he's good, she's a good entrepreneur, and I'm sure she'll do well.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's maybe where we all started, but you really do get better the more you see.
Oh yeah, no question. I'm still learning things,
Yeah.
and talking with entrepreneurs and so on about things.
Well, let's park that subject and let's go on to the last that I had here. And that was, I mean, you have been an angel investor, or even venture capitalist there as part of that for 32 years. Okay. So, what advice do you have for a successful entrepreneur or a successful executive, okay, who says, I'm really interested in this angel investing thing?
Well, for an angel investor, the first thing you got to do is figure out your financial position, because you should treat any angel investment as basically having no value once you make it.
Okay.
Because you just don't know if you're ever going to see that money back, and you don't know when you're going to see it back. So you need to look at your financial asset, and you need to figure out how much you want to keep and need to live on and so on and be comfortable. And then figure out if you have any money to do angel investing. I don't generally recommend having more than 10 to 12% of my total assets into angel investing.
And that would count your house in the 10 to 12%?
No. And angel
Liquid, you're talking about liquid assets.
Well, it depends on how liquid your house is. Most people have borrowed to get the house.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So liquid assets to me is that's stocks, bonds, commodities, those kind of.
Right, but you have, say you pay half down on your house, and you could count part of the house.
You would, okay.
Well, if you pay cash, let's say you bought $1 million home and you pay $500 down and only finance $500. That $500 that you got invested, actual equity, it kind of semi-liquid.
Yeah, it is semi-liquid. You're right.
So one, you need to figure out what you got and how much money you got available. I recommend personally, they two ways of doing angel investing. If you get into a group like Thai Angels or the Atlanta Technology Angels, you can get in with a group and probably invest less money per deal than you can as a single individual.
Right.
As a single individual, you need to plan on making an investment, I believe, at a minimum of $25,000. And I highly recommend that. So if you put $25,000 in a deal, you need to set aside another $25,000 for follow-on investments. That's probably going to be needed. But I also recommend that you make a minimum of 10 investments.
Okay.
This is why an angel group like Thai or ATA is good, because I know in Thai case, you can put in as little as 10,000. So you can make 10 investments and only have 100,000 invested with another 100 as back, where you make 20 individual investment without being in a group, and you have to do 25 each. 10 investment will get you $250,000, and then you need another quarter and back. So depending on how much you have I still believe in investing in group, like the angel.
Yeah, you were the lead investor that people said, what did SIG do, right? And if SIG was and then these other people, in fact, you invited me to a couple of those presentations at your office when you were at Imlay Investments and saying, I'm going to put money into this thing. Take a look at it and see if you're interested in joining me.
Right.
Yeah.
And in those cases, we wanted like 25,000 minimum to get people in. Now, the other thing I would highly recommend is getting involved with something like Angel Land.
Okay.
You well know, Charlie, you began Angel Land in 2010. And basically, that is a great way to get educated on what it is like to be an angel and to talk to other angels about their experience, what they have done right, what they have done wrong. And I just think it is a great opportunity. Now, ATA, Atlanta Technology Angel, also does a class once a year on being an angel. I recommend going to that. Anything to talk to people who are angels and who have been in the business a long time is a great way to get educated.
Yeah, I was looking at Angel Lounge when you were talking there, is you get education, okay? You also get network. I mean, if you haven't been doing angel investing, you don't know angel investors. So this is a way to get in a room with a lot of angel investors. So that gives you network. And then the other piece it gives you is looks. I mean, you start seeing companies and you start seeing how these people interact with these companies. And that's part of the education process. But I can't tell you how many people over the years came to me and said, man, I have this guy who started a company. It's amazing. And I think I really want to put money in it. I said, how many companies have you looked at? And they said, well, just this one. I said, no. I mean, if you look at 10, you're going to see where this rates in the, how it ranks in the 10 companies, not all of them are great ideas.
And that's the kind of thing that you get when you go to the angel lounge or whatever. You get to talk to other angels about what all they have done and so on. It's wonderful.
So is this, I hear people, one of the things that I decided is when I got into angel investor, I said that I didn't realize it till later and I renamed to myself, but I realized, having seen other angels, that I was a professional angel investor. In other words, I did it full time. This is what I did. Then there's the other, from the other side, there are these highly part-time, if you find a deal, tell me and I'll write a check for 25 grand. I don't even care what it is. I don't want to look at it. If Sig's in it, I'm in. Or if you, Charlie, are in, I'm in, that kind of, because the term sheets, all that stuff, and the management of the investment sitting over the store, if you will, it's all there. Okay. So why would I not invest in that thing? And then there's everything in between. So can you make money all the way along the line from being a professional angel investor, which you certainly were, to being, say, getting into groups? Okay, you put your own group together and maybe one guy's the lead there, or you could then go down further and you say, well, now we have more public groups like Thai groups, those kind of things. All right. And then you have these loose formulations, like what's the Venture South?
Yeah.
Venture South has what do they have? 150 investors, angels in there.
Yeah.
And one guy runs it. They all kind of pay him a fee. And so he makes enough money to live. And then we get to write checks for whatever, into a new LLC that's going to put $250,000 into this company. And I've only put $5,000 in.
Well, you can make money as long as you diversify along the way. Again, if you only make 2 or 3 investments, the odds of making money are slim. But, you could.
Am I always looking for TradeX?
No, you are looking to do, you want to get multiple deals where you hope that 2 or 3 of them will do okay.
Okay.
And if you happen to hit a TradeX, it's wonderful because, even out of 10 deals, you don't always get a TradeX.
No.
You don't always get an ISS. So, and
what does that mean though? When you're saying 2 to 3 deals, you should expect to do okay. So what does okay mean?
Okay mean at least you get your money back and maybe a little more.
So it could be a 2% return.
Yeah, it could.
That'd be okay. What about these guys that say, I just really want to give back to the community. It keeps me engaged. I'm doing some good work,
Well, I will come into this. My principle
in other words, should I expect to make money?
Yeah. Well, I believe that you need to have 2 reasons to be an angel. One reason is you are trying to make money. Now, I'm not saying you're going to make money, but you do want to make money.
Okay.
But the second reason is one of 3 reasons. You want to keep up with technology, So you are investing so you can stay current.
Okay.
2 is that you might be looking for a job. So you're trying to find what is out there in a technology that you might have some knowledge of.
Right.
Or 3, back to your point, you're giving back to the community. And you're giving back, particularly if you do the third one, you are less worried about how much you make. You are just trying to do good for the community. And, you still want to make money, but, as an angel investor, if you simply want to make money and that's your only motivation, I'm not sure I would be an angel investor, just to be very honest about it. I was going to do it, I would probably just invest in a VC fund or invest in something like that and not worry about it.
See, with me, I agree with you on that. I was looking back as what got me started in this is one, I did want to make money. Okay. In fact, I had to make money. All right. And then secondly is I just loved working with entrepreneurs. I just loved that startup environment, that sort of cracking the code deal. How do you kind of do this and all the problems around that from management teams and all that. I loved it. And so that's what kept me going. But I had to make money.
But see, that's why it took me so long to retire, because I enjoy doing it too. And I don't view it as work. I view it as doing something I enjoy.
Exactly.
And so, but I don't, in my angel investing, while I want to make money, I don't say that I had to make X amount on the deal. I don't say I need a 10% return or 10 times X return.
Yeah.
I don't. My feeling is a good entrepreneur and a good ideal, I'll make some money, and
that's it.
I just will with that.
And we know now what you consider a good entrepreneur. That's a good thing. That's been very helpful here. But, it's funny that I did find only one corporate executive that I ever met has stayed with this and loved this. And, that's Bill Midgett, and he's a guy that he's in it for, he does want to make money, but an equal priority is the love of working with entrepreneurs and startups, and he was a CEO of a major company, but their way of doing business was to always invest and buy up these new technologies. So he just was drawn to those people who started that.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked for him.
Well,
but he's done I don't know how well he's done, but I know he's just so fun to be around and he takes it so seriously.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll put a plug in for Siggy's here, because we gave him the Horizon Award in the most recent award ceremony. And the Horizon Award is about an angel investor who also is investing and growing the community and, trying to improve things. And Bill is a really great example of that, I believe.
My God, he's incredible how he has given up his time, and he's so smart. And I love one of the things, I did interview him on one thing, and I love his statement that he always says is, when I want to do something, find the room that has the smartest people, and I figure out how to get into that room. I love that. Okay.
Yep.
And he did that with angel investing, and he did it with, startups and funds, at the government level. He's just an incredibly gifted man and has the heart, real.
Yeah. No,
Well, that's good. Well, this is good advice to kind of get out of the blocks and how to be an angel. I like this. So let me close by saying thanks for all you've done in, the Atlanta technology community. And you've got all these crazy lifetime achievement awards. TAG gave you one just last night. So you've got another one. So people recognize what you've done. You've been in this for a very, very long time. You actually, I think, put us on the map, by the love that I've always seen you have and respect for entrepreneurs. I would call you a servant leader. in those respects, and we're in this season as the Christian church, we're in this season of called Advent, okay? Where in Advent, we're preparing for this expectation, if you will, of Jesus to come. So Christmas Day kind of a thing, Jesus has come to save us. God is coming to earth. And it was Jesus who actually showed us clearly how to be a servant leader. And you, Sig, are kind of like that, in that what he did is he helped everyone who asked him for help. And just the other day we were talking and you said, I remember, well, it wasn't just the other day. It was something that happened at an Angel Lounge, and there was an entrepreneur that walked in who I thought was a crazy long shot. I just wouldn't really spend time with them because they're just not far enough along or just don't even understand what they're talking about. And you set up a meeting with that person, and I said, Sig, what are you doing? And you said, I just like to help them. That's what I do. I just like to help them. There's nothing more than servant leadership than that. So if someone asks you for help, you give it. And you've done that for 32 years. And the impact that you've made is so far and wide. I just can't help but just thank you and admire you for all that you've done.
Well, thank you, Charlie. I have just tried to help the entrepreneur and grow the community because I believe that the technology community here can be very significant.
Well, you have put it on track, and there's some new angel investors that are making far more than you and I ever dreamed could be made, okay? And because it has grown. There's another biblical expression that says, we drink from wells we did not dig, okay? And we eat from trees we didn't plant, and that's a lot of that tilling and drilling for wells and planting. That was a lot of the work of the 90s, all right, into the early 2000s. And now people are coming along, and they're certainly benefiting from the Atlanta tech community, which has momentum. I saw something that came out, and it showed the incubators and accelerators. Did you see that list?
No, I didn't see that one.
It came out just this morning, and it was the list. I'm thinking, I remember when I started, the only thing that was out there was ATDC.
Yeah.
Okay, which started at Georgia Tech in 1980, and I got involved in the early 90s in this whole thing. It was the only thing out there. I mean, if you wanted to do startups, you went to the ATDC and you said, well, who's here and what are they doing?
Yeah.
That list had to have, this is in the Southeast now, okay, so it's beyond just Atlanta. That list had to have 50 incubators / accelerators on the list. I was like, oh my God. Now as an entrepreneur, I don't even know where you choose to go.
Well, that one of the problem entrepreneurs have,
and that's a lot of what you did to make that all a reality. So I'm glad you made money. I'm glad you were successful. I'm glad God gave you the heart to just serve for no other reason. You just love them. Okay. You're a good man, Sig. You're a good man. So I'm going to end the interview and then hold on for just a second while I end it, and we'll talk for a second. But for those of you who have watched this to the end, thank you very much for doing that. Subscribe to the Paparelli podcast and to charliep.com so you get all whatever I write. And you'll hear great things like from men like Sig with all of this experience, that he'll share what he's learned over his 32 years as an angel investor. So thank you very much for listening. Take care.